that good fall buzzbait bite, you just can't beat it at all. So much fun. That guy, Strike King Buzzbait, striking again. So we're out today and we've lost our thermocline. We've got some cool weather has finally come in. We've got that good fall starting to hit the air. You get that crisp morning and things change. So now our thermoclines in our lakes are starting to dissipate. They're completely gone and the fish are starting to scatter. I really love to get out this time of the year and throw a buzzbait, cover water. The fish are really going to start to transition to the backs of the creeks and focus on these balls of baits that are starting to come in out of the main lake and get ready for that winter pattern. So buzzbait on the bank, I get to cover a whole lot of water and get to catch a whole lot of bass. It's a great way to get out here and enjoy it. There you go. I mean, that was a perfect buzzbait bite. That was absolutely awesome. Come right off that grass mat and she came right out there and just from behind knocked slack in your line, the ones you really get to set the hook on. Not a giant fish, but I mean, that's what you come out in the fall for, is to catch these fish. Super aggressive, they fight hard, they're getting ready for winter, they're healthy. I mean, it's just why you come in the fall. I came right around that dock, which a dock is usually a high percentage target with a buzzbait, banging down the poles. But there's some holes in behind this grass, so I throw over in behind the hole, bring it from the very back of the bank across the little lip of grass there, and as soon as I come on that outside edge, I mean, just smoked it. You can tell that fish was aggressive, wanted it, didn't nip at it, and they fight hard. So in transition to where we're going, this is all we're starting to work our way into the back of a creek here. So that's kind of the beginning stages of what you're looking for to see where those fish are in transition to, because they're going to work their way to the back of this creek where the bait's ultimately going to migrate to for the heavy fall. So they're starting to get there. So that's a good sign, good indicator that we're on the right track. And all we got to do is keep our head down and look for more areas like this. In the fall like this, the bass have already been through a few cycles of bait. They cycle from what they feed on throughout the year. They'll start their year on crawfish as they come out of their holes and the molt and things like that. And that's why your jigs and things like that are so good early in the spring and early and spawn and post spawn around fish and things like that. And then the bluegill start to come into play right after the spawn, all through the summer months when the bluegill spawn. So the fish are really concentrating on a bluegill diet a lot of times, and that goes from anywhere that you live in the country for the most part. And then they start to transition back onto the shad again. And shad is a big key forage for them in the fall. Everything from big gizzard shad all the way down to match the hatch when they're keyed in on that little bitty bait that makes the bass so hard to catch. So that's what we're doing right now this time of the year, especially with the buzzbait and things like that. You're mimicking, a shad and things like that. That's what that flash is across the top of the water. And if you pop your buzzbait a little bit, you'll see it throw water. It's like something's chasing little groups of shad. And that's what these bass are keying on. So it's just a great way, it's a fun way to catch a lot of bass. You get out here and it's something you can just put the trolling motor down on. You don't have to know anything about the lake or the body of water. You pick an area that you like, whether it's one big creek arm, and just start fishing. You'll start to dial it in, you'll start to figure out, keep a mental note of where you started getting bites and what they were was it on a transition rock? Because, was it like what we're fishing here today, a transition of cattails into bank grass and things like that? Was there a clump of grass underwater? Was there big balls of bait around? And I've already started to see, where we are, small balls of bait out here that little bass are running through and spooking it. So key things like that, making little mental notes. And then that way when you go to another area in the lake, you don't have to waste your time starting all the way out on the main lake if you don't want to. To go ahead and just start probably 3/4 back in your creek or near the back of the creek, because that's where the concentration of fish are. That's just small little pieces of the puzzle that you can put together that'll help you catch them faster and more effectively. Over the years, those are the things that I've put together and that really helped me, so maybe they'll help you guys as well. There's a big one. That's a little bit better fish. Oh. Yeah, absolutely smoked that old buzzbait. Just an old fat, chunky, healthy bass. Look at the belly on that booger. I mean, got that old hump back, got that northern quality to that fish. You see that deal? This is why you come out in the fall. Look how healthy this fish is. I mean, got a belly on it, got a big old, just thick back. They're really starting to put that weight on for the fall. Put this guy back. And I tell you what, if you look up, you can see we're starting to get to the very back of this pocket, and we've got a couple of little jut outs right here. That's where that fish came off of. Perfect ambush point. I mean, it just set up classically. And there's so many of those little ambush points down this bank. If you can look and see, he'll show you. That's what you want to key on when you get around these little stick outs and these little divots and things like that, where these fish can set up and just ambush this bait as it comes into the backs of these pockets. We got a nice good breeze in here. I mean, it just sets up perfect. So we don't get back to it, I can tell you that much. You know, I've got a buzz frog on here right now on my buzzbait, and that's just because how warm the water is, and I want to cover quite a bit of this water and fish through. When the water cools off for me, I'll go back to a skirt on my buzzbait majority of the time, and that allows me to fish my buzzbait a lot slower. In that cooler water, the fish are a little more lethargic, you're gonna get bigger bites, and so on and so forth. So I like to go back to a skirt, just say around that 70-degree water temperature and below. I like to start throwing that old skirt again back on my buzzbait. When that water gets warm, and like we're still in the 80s right now, we're in 83-degree water. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back with my buzz frog type baits. And that's just because it's heavier. Now it makes my buzzbait heavier. I can throw it further. I can cover more water quickly. And that's a benefit to me because the fish are actively feeding hard. Now, whenever I'm fishing and the water's cooler, I want to go back to that skirt on my buzzbait a lot of times, because when I throw that out there, it's a lot lighter. That buzzbait comes back to the surface a lot faster, and then I'm able to roll it a lot slower and get that blade to thump, 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 versus what I'm having to do to keep that buzz frog up on top of the water. So little subtle changes like that will help you get more bites and then maximize the area and the span of water that you're getting bites out of. So just another key to keep in your mind. I will use a braided line on my buzzbait, and I'll also use fluorocarbon like I'm using today. A lot of that dictated by what am I fishing it around? Am I fishing it around, you know, lay downs? Am I fishing it around a lot of heavy flooded cover? Am I just fishing it over open water? What am I fishing it around? And if I'm gonna be fishing my buzzbait around heavy cover and limbs and lay downs and things like that, where not only a fish is gonna take control of me when he eats it if he's a big one, but if I get hung up a lot, I'm gonna throw braided line. I really like a 30 or a 50-pound braid, depending on how far a cast I wanna make. But I don't go too crazy heavy on my braided line, just because I like my reel to hold a lot of line. So when I'm throwing a buzz frog on my buzzbait, I can get that extra distance out of it. But today, as you can see, we're fishing a lot of open water, just a lot of edges of cattails and a lot of grass edges and things like that. So I've got 20-pound fluorocarbon line on today. 20-pound is hardy. It's a really hardy line. It doesn't have a crazy amount of stretch. And being that it's fluorocarbon, it doesn't matter if it sinks. You're not letting that line set in the water long enough for it to sink anyway. We're just throwing it out and retrieving it. That's why I'm using a high-speed reel. But my main focus is I really like to have that little bit of extra split-second delay in my hook set and that stretch of that line over braid. A lot of times I get anxious, just like a 12-year-old kid out here catching bass, and I'll pull it away from them when I see them eat it, because we have a quick reaction time. If I'm throwing a braided line, as soon as I start to pull on this rod, it's gonna start taking that line up, it's gonna start taking that bait away from that fish. And if he doesn't have it good, or if he isn't eating that bait and turned, I'm gonna pull it out of his mouth. I've learned that time and time again. So that's one of the reasons I really like to go with the fluorocarbon. And that goes all the way down to my rod. You can see my rod is a medium heavy when I catch these fish. It loads up. I mean, I've got a good parabolic rod, bends all the way down to the first guide here. What that does is it allows me to have that, I can still set the hook how I want to set the hook when I see him eat it. But with the give in my rod and the give in my line, it allows that little bit extra time for that fish to grab that bait, turn, and then actually to come back and hook him perfectly. So that's my rationale behind it, and it's always worked well for me. And those are just things that I've dialed in over the years of throwing buzz baits and topwater baits. A little bit lighter action rod than what you would actually think you're gonna throw, really high speed reel, and you know, your line choice is really paramount. You know, whether you throw a braided line or a fluorocarbon line, you're not going to go wrong either way. I'm not saying that. I'm just, you know, for me, for maximizing getting the fish in the boat and things like that, because I truly believe you're probably going to get about the same amount of bites on both lines on a buzzbait. So those are just key points for me, and you know, something for you guys to just play with and see if it works for you. So when I'm up close and target casting, I really like to go to a shorter rod. Today I'm throwing a 7-1, just a good middle of the road rod. I can make some pretty lengthy casts with it, but I'm also accurate with it when I'm starting to put it in these holes, in these cattails and things like that. So shorter the rod, I'm much more accurate. Most of your anglers will be more accurate with a shorter rod. I know guys that throw them on as short as 610s. Especially when you get around docks and laydowns and things, when you really want to put it up there and come right down the side of them to where you're getting, you know, every bang for your buck, if you will. And now if I'm going to fish it over open water, I'll go up to a 7.3, 7.4 even, because I'm just going to cast across big flats or grass mats or something like that, because I'm going to make a long cast and I'm going to need every bit of that rod to take up all that slack in a high-speed reel to get that hook into that fish on a long cast. So just a few pointers to help you guys understand, you know, possibly when you need a longer rod versus a shorter rod.